Urine, wee, piss, the old lemon drizzle. During the Middle Ages, it was in great demand. It was fermented and used in tanning and cloth dyeing, fertility and skincare products, as well as magical potions, of course. But even worse, according to medieval physicians, there were over 20 varieties of pee that needed to be looked at, smelled and tasted to try and diagnose any ailments. Let's travel back in time and take a look at some of the many weird and wonderful uses for urine in the Middle Ages. Welcome to Medieval Madness. Liquid gold. During the Middle Ages, urine was such a valuable resource that it was collected. There were no inside toilets unless you were a monk and lived in a monastery or a fancy noble in a castle. Most outside toilets, or middens as they were known, might be some distance from the home, and who had time to be trapezing outside in the cold and dark in all weathers when you're busting at the seams. So the chamber pot was the only sensible solution. But the urine wasn't thrown away in the morning. Instead, it was poured into a storage pot that was usually kept some distance away from the house, and there it was left to ferment. The fermentation of urine by bacteria produces ammonia. Known as lant, the incredibly foul-smelling stale urine could then be used for a number of processes. Now wash your hands. The medievals usually washed their linen undergarments regularly. They were the clothes that lay next to the skin and soaked up the sweat and odours. Outer layers were usually made from heavier fabrics such as wool, which took ages to wash and dry, even in the summer months. On wash day, the linen garments were placed into a tub of stale urine to soak before being taken to the closest river or stream, where they were rinsed and beaten with a paddle or stones to remove the dirt. Once clean, they were laid out in the sun to dry. And if you're thinking about cutting out the middleman and just wetting yourself, do remember that it needs to be stale urine. Wee was also used as a mordant for dyeing cloth. A mordant is a fixative for dye, developing the colour and binding it to the fabric. The woad plant was finely chopped and used as a source of blue dye. Ground into a powder, urine was added so that the threads could be dipped into the green mixture. When removed from the liquid and exposed to oxygen, the threads would turn blue and the dye was fixed. One of the uses for stored urine was the fulling of woven fabric. This helped the cloth to become firmer by soaking it in an alkaline solution such as fuller's earth and stale pea. The mixture helped remove any dirt or grease from the fabric, which was then pounded into the cloth using either the feet or wooden paddles. There might even be urine collectors, especially in the city. People would leave their chamber pots outside on the street, and the collector would pour its contents into his wooden barrel on wheels, which he would push along the streets. Some urine collectors even hung around taverns with a bucket waiting for the drinkers to take a leak. Leather was an important resource in the Middle Ages, used for harnesses and tack, quivers, scabbards, boots, clothing, belts, sandals, armor, and numerous other products. Tanning was known as a noxious or odoriferous trade, and so tanneries were usually kept on the outskirts of communities, relegated beyond the confines of the city walls out among the poor. Once the animal's skin had been procured, it usually arrived at the tannery covered in dirt and stiff with blood. The skin was washed in water and scoured to remove any traces of fat and flesh. The hair was then removed by soaking the skin in a vat of urine. After it was loosened, the hair was scraped off with a knife. To make things worse, the leather was often softened with dung in a process known as baiting. The dung was pounded into the skin or soaked in a solution of animal brains. Pigeon or dog feces were among those most commonly used during the process. Cleansing waters. Using urine that had been sitting around for days on end wasn't just limited to the manufacturing of clothing. In the 12th century Trotula, treatise containing 3 texts on women's medicine, it is recommended that if a woman is unable to become pregnant, she should, quote, "Take 2 pots, and in each one place wheat bran, and put some of the man's urine in one of them with the bran, and in the other put some urine of the woman with the rest of the bran, and let the pots sit for 9 or 10 days. If the infertility is the fault of the woman, you will find worms in her pot and the brand will stink. You will find the same thing in the other pot if it is the man's fault, and if you find this in neither, then in neither is there any defect, and they are able to be aided by the benefit of medicine so that they might conceive. However, I do wonder if they ever had a scenario where both of the pots of urine that had been fermenting for 9 or 10 days didn't smell bad. In another remedy, it was suggested that the pee of a younger person might help. Quote, "For removing an abscess of the face, wrap in tow tartar boiled with the strongest white wine and with the urine of a child, and with a linen cloth leave it through the night under hot ashes. In the morning grind the tartar and mix it with honey and anoint the face." For the woman trying to remove unwanted body hair, quote, "To become very soft and smooth and remove hairs from the head down, she was recommended to take a steam bath and anoint herself all over with a depilatory cream made from well-sifted quicklime. If the cream is too thick, the woman should, quote, dilute it with her own urine, for the addition of more water would make it worse." Caustic chemicals and urine, always a great combination for sensitive skin. Troubled waters. One of the ways that medieval physicians used to check on a patient's health was to examine their pee. Physicians used guides called uroscopies to help them to understand the condition of the urine being studied. A professor of medieval literature named M. Teresa Tavormina from Michigan State University discovered over 210 manuscripts containing uroscopies written in Middle English and just as many more in French and Latin. The Welsh medieval manuscript, the Red Book of Her Jest, written just after 1382, is one of the most important medieval scripts written in the Welsh language. It has a section on uroscopy titled The Qualities of Urine. The opening lines read, quote, "Since it is through the qualities of the urine that a person's faults and his dangers and his diseases and his illnesses can be identified, they believe that the look, colour, smell, and even the taste of urine, sweet, sour or bitter, could reveal what disease, if any, the patient was suffering from." The texts were often short and described as cheat sheets by Tavormina. On Urines was written by Giles Corbeil around the beginning of the 13th century. It explains that, quote, "To be an expert judge of urine, you must consider with care the following things: what sort, what it is, what is in it, how much, how often, where, when, age, nature, sex, exercise, anger, diet, anxiety, hunger, movement, baths, ointment, drink. But the first four, which are particularly important, form the best basis of judgment. Health or illness, strength or debility, deficiency, excess or balance, are determined with certainty by examination in this way." Corbeil goes on to tell the reader that any, quote, "urine darkened by a black cloudiness, muddied with sediment, and accompanied by poor hearing and insomnia, portends a flux of blood from the nose." Corbeil ends this section, pretty unhelpfully, advising that, quote, "the patient will either die or recover." He goes on to say that if the urine is livid, that's discoloured, not angry, then Corbeil suggests that this could be caused by any number of illnesses. Anything from fever to falling sickness, a defect of the lungs, or even an ailment of the womb. Quote, "Thin urine, white in colour, could denote many problems such as dropsy, intoxication, delirium, diabetes, chill of liver, and in the old it is a sign of debility or childishness," which we can assume means dementia or Alzheimer's. A healthy patient's urine will have a white sediment when boiled, whereas, quote, "a very limited quantity passed with difficulty, livid and oily, foreshadows death." If the patient has a continued fever and the urine is, quote, "wine-coloured," there could be a danger to health, or it could mean that the patient has spent too much time dancing, or even just had too much sex. It doesn't clarify whether he means white wine or red wine, which is quite an important distinction, I would have thought. He does say that swollen, airy, or bubbly wee would indicate crudeness of the humours, and if it looked like snot was floating in it, then it meant that you were pregnant. Congratulations! Unless you're a man, in which case it indicates gout. Some physicians claimed that you could even tell if a woman was a virgin or has had sex recently just by examining her urine. Magic water. Alchemy began in ancient times and developed independently in Greece, India, the Muslim world, and China. In medieval Europe, its revival began with the introduction of alchemy from 1144, when Robert of Chester finished his translation of the Testamentum Moreni, the book on the composition of alchemy, from an Arabic work by the Umayyad prince, Khalid ibn Yazid. Alchemy was a mixture of philosophy, science, and mysticism. Alchemical understanding in Europe mostly came from translations throughout the 12th and 13th centuries. Picatrix, also known as The Aim of the Sage, is the title of one of the most fascinating treatises on magic and astrology to be translated from this period. It was translated first into Spanish and then Latin. Originally an 11th century text of Arabic origin, it has all sorts of weird and wonderful spells and rites, including summoning spirits and creating talismans, as well as cooking up remedies. By the end of the Middle Ages, the book's popularity had spread, and there were copies in libraries as far apart as Krakow and Paris, London and Florence. Magicians are required to use many strange ingredients for recipes contained in the Picatrix. One potion recommends that to rid yourself of any spirits that may want to harm you or make you ill, you should mix, quote, half human blood melted with 2 small amounts of alm oil and 2 small amounts of rabbit brain, and mix them well with 1 ounce of donkey urine. Drink that mixture for 7 days in a row, first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, to settle the person's spirits and fix any harm. Another potion calls for the, quote, brain of an ewe, deer blood, human blood, rabbit canine tooth, and 1 small amount of horse urine. Others ask for human urine or cat's urine, as well as camel sweat and human salt of urine. Yeah, I don't know what salt of urine is, so if you've got an idea, maybe just leave a comment down below, or don't. Unsurprisingly, some believe Picatrix to be a dangerous and creepy text, and even today warn that the mind control and destructive spells contained within its pages should be kept away from the general public. Many alchemists of the time sought out the Philosopher's Stone, a substance that they believed could transform base metals such as lead into gold. Alchemists like the German Henrik Brand were very interested in pea and combined it with numerous other ingredients. His 1630 recipe mixed together saltpetre, alum, and concentrated urine to make silver, which unfortunately didn't work. He did, however, discover phosphorus by heating the residue of boiled down urine. The pale green glowing substance must have seemed magical to Brand, who kept his discovery a secret, working with it to try and produce gold. And there you go, lots of different ways that urine was used in the Middle Ages. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Medieval Madness. Please do subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!